I think it was the, so in a recent video, I think it was the follow-up Ellen Fisher video, the response video, I talked about removing a video I had up. It was a critique of 80-10-10 from a few years ago. And in the video, someone had pointed out at the end that I recommended Neal Barnard, recommended his books, Reversing Diabetes, whatever it's called. And since I do not recommend Neal Barnard as like a good source on nutrition, I just decided to remove the video. The video wasn't even that great anyway, so I mean, I'm definitely not pro 80-10-10. I'm more anti 80-10-10 than I was then, but who even cares about 80-10-10 anymore? I mean, it's pretty much dead at this point, isn't it? I mean, there's still people eating like high fruit, low-fat diets, but I don't think they're necessarily following 80-10-10. Like, they're at least not so hardcore that they're like avoiding garlic and onion. So anyway, I got quite a few comments from people saying, why don't you recommend Neal Barnard? Like, he's a doctor, he's an actual MD, he's actually like published research in the field of nutrition, specifically on low-fat vegan diets and diabetes. All of the following I've addressed in previous videos, so if you've already watched those videos, there's not going to be really any new information here, just being honest. But again, since so many people asked, I figured I would have like a dedicated video on this because it's kind of hard to find my viewpoints because all those other videos aren't specifically on Barnard, although I talk about him and like his beliefs in those videos. So here we go. In What the Health, Barnard is interviewed, and at one point he talks about diabetes, the cause of diabetes, and I'm not going to show the clip here or any clip from the film because I don't want to be demonetized for 30 days again. So yeah, if you want to see the whole clip, I do have it in my original review of the film, so you can check it out there. But anyway, to summarize what Barnard says, he says that diabetes is not caused by a diet high in carbs, it is not caused by sugar, that it is caused by an animal-based diet, a diet that is high in, animal products, that it is this type of diet, that it is animal products that build up fat in the blood, and that this is ultimately what causes insulin resistance and diabetes. Because I don't want to rehash what I already said, here is my exact response in my What the Health review. So Barnard is saying two things here and implying a third. So the first thing he's saying is that there is this buildup of fat in the muscle and that this is what causes type 2 diabetes. The second thing he says is that this fat is coming from animal products. And then the third, he's implying that a high carbohydrate diet is preferable. While it's true that a buildup of fat in the muscle has been associated with insulin resistance, where is the evidence that this is caused by an animal-based diet? Studies like Barnard's own studies on diabetes and low-fat vegan diets do seem to support these claims, since the people eating the low-fat vegan diets did see greater improvements than the people following the typical ADA diet. This is not surprising since the vegans tended to lose more weight, and weight loss virtually always leads to improvements in glycemic control. There's also this 20-year perspective study of over 82,000 women that found that the women who were eating a low-carb diet high in animal fats and animal proteins, that they did not have any sort of reduction in diabetes risks. Although that's certainly a far cry from animal products cause diabetes. Most importantly, numerous studies have found that low-carb, high-fat, non-vegan diets can be quite effective at improving insulin sensitivity. Of course, such a diet does tend to raise LDL levels. This is not surprising given the saturated fat content in such a diet, but there is a way around this. It's called Eco-Atkins, and it's basically the vegan version of an Atkins diet, of a low-carb, high-fat, high-protein diet. This study compared it to a low-fat vegetarian diet and found that while both groups lost about the same amount of weight, the Eco-Atkins group saw greater improvements in blood pressure and blood lipid profiles. And that study I mentioned earlier on women, on over 80,000 women, well, they found that the women who were consuming a low-carb diet predominated by plants, so the fat and protein was coming mostly from plants instead of animal sources. Well, they found that for them, they had a 20% lower risk for diabetes when compared to the women eating a low-fat diet. My point here is that many different diets have proven effective at improving glycemic control, at least in the short term, and that basically any diet that results in weight loss will be effective. This is why organizations like Diabetes UK don't recommend one specific diet. Recent systematic reviews and meta-analyses, including people with type 2 diabetes, report that although low-carb diets may lead to significantly greater weight loss and improvements in HbA1c and lipids over the short term, there's no greater advantage over the longer term when compared to other diets. This reinforces Diabetes UK's call for an individualized approach to diet, taking into consideration people's personal preferences. And so finally, the third statement or implication, Barnard's implication that a low-fat, high-carb vegan diet is optimal. So I've already talked about this pretty extensively in this video debunking McDougall's "the fat you eat is the fat you wear" propaganda. Suffice it to say, all fat is not the same. Certainly trans fats, saturated fats, these are fats that we want to be limiting, but the evidence is clear that we want to replace these fats with polyunsaturated fats, that this is one of the best ways to reduce heart disease risk, cardiovascular disease risk. The idea that these foods, that nuts and seeds, sources of healthy fats and proteins and minerals like zinc and iron, that these foods should be limited to 1 tablespoon a day. This is just not based on good science, and it very likely makes a vegan diet harder to stick with. If you want more info on intramyocellular lipids, I do go into more detail on that in a couple videos in my response to Mike the Vegan on oil, and also in this response to Happy Healthy Vegan. Suffice it to say that this belief that animal products are the sole cause of diabetes is pretty ridiculous. It's not supported by the evidence, and it's particularly ridiculous given the evidence that we have that finds that diets high in animal products, low in carbs, can be effective for some people when it comes to managing their diabetes, when it comes to lowering the amount of medication that they have to take, even getting off insulin completely in some cases. Diabetes is a complex disease like many diseases. It can have multiple causes. To say that it's just animal products or that it's just sugar or whatever is pretty ridiculous and ultimately does not help people. Acting as though there aren't different ways to eat to achieve the same results, to help people manage their diabetes, or again, to even get off medication completely, is just lying. The other problem that I have with Neal Barnard and his approach to nutrition is his insistence on eating low fat by avoiding oils completely and even limiting like whole fats like nuts and seeds and avocados. Now, when I was checking up on things for this, when I was doing, a little more research, I got excited for a second because something that I had previously referenced, something from PCRM, which is the nonprofit that Barnard has founded back in the 80s, I think, a page that I had referenced where they talked about only eating an ounce, no more than an ounce of nuts and seeds per day, was gone. This is something that I had referenced, I think in the response to Happy Healthy Vegan. And when you go to the link, it says page not found. So I was like, oh, maybe they've changed their viewpoint a little bit. But no, this is a podcast from just last month, from October, where they say the same thing. Limit nuts and seeds to 1 ounce per day to avoid gaining weight.
The data's pretty clear that nuts and seeds in about 1 ounce serving per day, that's about, well, you tell me, what's an ounce, do you know off the top of your head?
All right, so kind of my rule with nuts, as I've been told, is kind of like a palmful. Not quite the handful, but a palmful, just enough to fill that palm.
Right. So basically you're going to put your hand out, and then assuming you don't have like a giant, baseball mitt hand, put your hand out. Like people are like, yes! And then you want to put the nuts on the hand, and then to where they meet where your fingers are, that's kind of where you want to stop. So
Okay.
Really level. It's about a level quarter cup, and I mean like level, a little less than that actually.
And they have another very recent podcast on cooking without oil for those trying to lose weight and to maintain their overall health. So can you be healthy limiting nuts and seeds to, an ounce per day and avoiding oil entirely? Sure, very likely. Depends on what the rest of your diet looks like, right? Do some people find doing this, limiting fat intake, helpful for weight loss? Sure, very likely. But implying that this is necessary for everyone, that these should be standard guidelines, that if you want to lose weight or you want to avoid gaining weight, that you should limit fat intake, is wrong. Some people find it helpful. Some people find it helpful eating a higher carb, lower fat diet, that they find that this helps to, reduce cravings. They feel satisfied. They're getting high volume foods, whatever. But some people do not. Some people find that they are not as satisfied and they just end up gaining weight because they end up eating more calories from carbs because they're hungry. Then there are people who don't focus on macronutrients at all. They just focus on calories, or they just focus on whole foods in general. There are people like myself who focus more on protein and don't really care how much fat we're getting or how much carbs we're getting. I have plenty of days where I'm eating 4 tablespoons of peanut butter, like 2 tablespoons of my oatmeal, 2 tablespoons on a sandwich. I'm eating chia seeds in my oatmeal. I'm eating tofu. I'm eating walnuts. I'm eating olive oil. I'm getting like 100 grams of fat per day. I do this pretty regularly, and I'm easily able to maintain a normal BMI. Suggesting to me that I should eat less fat in order to avoid gaining weight when I've been eating like this consistently for 2 to 3 years? Why? And the evidence supports this. Looking at all of the evidence, not just one study here, one study there, no one diet is more or less effective than any other diet in terms of weight loss. And unfortunately, for most people who are struggling with their weight, none of these diets work. None of these diets prove successful in the long term. Someone may be able to stay on it for a little while and lose the weight, but most of the time, they only lose a little bit of weight. They end up gaining back a lot of the weight. Diets for most people just don't work. And implying that there are health benefits beyond just weight management for the general population from limiting healthy fats, polyunsaturated fats, monounsaturated fats is also ludicrous. Consensus is that these foods are healthy, and the body of evidence definitely does not support limiting them to a handful a day. It's fine if you personally want to do that. Maybe you find that you're just really prone to overeating nuts, and so it's better for you if you are limiting their amount, and like peanut butter and all of that stuff. But there's no evidence that you have to, that eating more than 1 ounce per day is harmful. And the same goes for certain oils too. Again, there's no evidence that avoiding things like olive oil is going to benefit you health-wise. I have more information on that, again, in my response to Mike the Vegan. And then there are people who struggle to maintain their triglyceride levels. They struggle with maintaining healthy, normal triglyceride levels. For these people, recommending a higher carb, lower fat diet could make things worse, because some people, they find that any carbs, even healthy whole carbs like whole grains and legumes, raise their levels. So for these people, it makes sense to replace at least some of these carbs with more fats, with more unsaturated fat, nuts, seeds, etc. But possibly the worst part about Barnard and PCRM's low-fat recommendations, their obsession with low fat, is that these recommendations do not just apply to adults. They extend to children as well. In Nutrition for Kids, A Dietary Approach to Lifelong Health, they say to, quote, choose low-fat, healthful options whenever possible, and they also say that kids aged 3 to 6 should have only 1 to 1.5 servings of nuts, seeds, and tofu per day. Again, why? There is no evidence that we should be limiting fat intake so severely for children, for anyone, but especially for children, especially for vegan children who tend to struggle more with getting enough calories and weight gain than the average kid. This is why many vegans like myself choose to feed our kids more fat, fat from foods like avocados and peanut butter or whatever, as a way to make sure that they are getting enough calories. And it's why dietetic organizations also recommend higher fat foods as a way to make sure that vegan kids are getting enough calories and as a way to limit the amount of fiber. Because when kids are eating so much fiber, like PCRM recommends, it can make it hard for them to eat enough. There's no evidence that a diet higher in healthy plant fats is harmful for children, and there's no evidence that a diet like this low-fat sample diet that PCRM recommends, that such a diet is healthier. If your kid is actually struggling with their weight, if they are overweight, then yeah, sure, maybe limiting fat intake could help, talk to your doctor, but again, the average vegan kid does not have this problem. So why are we so focused on limiting fat intake? The bottom line is the reason I personally do not turn to Barnard as a reliable source on nutrition is the same reason I don't listen to keto or paleo doctors when it comes to nutrition. All of these people greatly oversimplify nutrition by acting as though there is one true cause, trademarked, one true cause for most diseases. In the case of Barnard and many plant-based doctors, it's animal products, animal fat, animal protein, and often just fat in general. And then in the case of like keto and paleo people, it's carbs. They also tend to downplay or just flat out ignore any evidence supporting the other side, right? So plant-based doctors will ignore any evidence showing that a low-carb diet can be effective for weight loss, diabetes, whatever. And then the keto doctors will do the same kind of shit, right? They'll ignore any evidence showing that a low-fat, plant-based diet can be effective for weight loss, diabetes, whatever. You can find more nuanced views on both sides from a few people, but overwhelmingly the message is clear that if you eat X diet, whatever it is, you'll lose weight, you'll reverse diabetes, you'll clear up your skin, whatever. The truth is far more nuanced and far less interesting. It's not really something that's easily marketable because ultimately it's, whatever works for you, whatever diet you can stick with. Some people find higher carb healthy, some people find lower carb healthy, and the evidence finds little difference between the two. They both get results for the few people who can actually stick with them, likely because both of these diets help, again, people who can stick with them, helps them to eat less calories. It also often goes hand in hand with other healthy practices like exercising and not smoking and eating vegetables. And they can both be done vegan or non-vegan, right? I've talked before, you can eat low-fat vegan, you can also eat low-carb, even keto vegan. You can eat a very, heavy animal based diet that is low carb, but you can also still eat animal products and eat low fat. So this obsession over low fat diets in the vegan community just does not make sense to me. And I feel like you are just alienating a lot of people who maybe find that a low-carb diet is effective for them, but they don't really like the idea that they're eating and harming a lot of animals. They would like to do it in a more compassionate way, maybe even a vegan way. But presenting vegan as if it's low-fat and that's it, it's not very helpful for these people. So to wrap things up, I just wanted to briefly share this post, this quickly assessing the credibility of public experts. I think it's very useful going forward if you're trying to decide who to listen to when it comes to nutrition or really anything else. I think this is a really helpful little kind of checklist to go through. So number 2 is something that I've just been talking about. Does she try to explain everything with one idea? So again, this kind of knocks out the vast majority of the popular nutrition experts, right? The ones that you are commonly going to see referenced by like Huffington Post and The Guardian and all of these places, right? Because they're just trying to get clicks. The work of Philip Tetlock and others has shown that people who have one big idea to explain everything are very bad at accurately modeling the world, predicting outcomes, and recommending effective actions. These people are often selected for media attention because they are clear and confident about their beliefs. The world is a complex place, and people who are able to model that complexity in their minds have better information than those who aren't. Look for people who tend to use multi-factor explanations. And number 3, kind of building off of that, does he show nuance? So again, saying that diabetes just has one true cause, whether it's carbs or it's animal protein, not very nuanced. Is she able to change her mind? Does he lean toward conspiracy explanations and or blaming the government? Both sides do this a lot. Does she cite evidence that isn't representative of the literature as a whole? Again, both the keto and the plant-based people do this a lot. Does he portray experts who disagree with him as corrupt, stupid, or dishonest? Does the topic relate to personal identity, or is it otherwise highly political or controversial? I think you would see this more on the plant-based side for those doctors who are ethical vegans. Someone like Barnard, I don't think McDougall necessarily is, but Barnard absolutely is. And I think we see this with a lot of vegans in general who are just really unwilling to admit that a vegan diet is not the best diet ever, all the time, forever, because they want it to be that way, because they care about animals. I'm not saying saying it's coming from a bad place, but it does make you not a very trustworthy source when it comes to nutrition when your basis for everything is, well, this diet has to be the best so that we can convince people to eat it so that we can save more animals. So anyway, that's a great research to turn to, again, if you're ever questioning someone's expertise, or maybe if they're a little bit biased or promoting something a little bit too heavily. That's a good thing to look at. And again, it's not just about nutrition either. And finally, the people who I do promote, which if you've seen even like 2 of my videos, you probably already know who I'm going to say. I mention them all the time, but it would be the Vegan RD, theveganrd.com, and Jack Norris, veganhealth.org. They are both registered dietitians, and neither one of them promotes any specific vegan diet, just a balanced vegan diet. They don't demonize any particular macronutrient, protein, carbs, or fat, and they don't treat vegan as this like amazing special diet, and if you go vegan, you're just gonna be amazing and healthy, and that's it. They tend to be much more focused on the evidence and much more grounded in their beliefs and in their nutrition advice. And that is it. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I look forward to all of the "he's a doctor and you're not, so what do you know" types of comments. I mean, yes, that is absolutely true, but there are also doctors who are anti-vax, so I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I'm trying to go by scientific consensus, and the consensus is absolutely not that a low-fat vegan diet is the diet for diabetes management, reversal, prevention, etc. Or that the only way to lose weight is to limit fat intake. Again, not the consensus. If anything, we are just continually moving farther and farther away from low-fat recommendations. It wouldn't surprise me if in the next decade, even the recommendations for low saturated fat are not as clear-cut. It wouldn't surprise me if the recommendations are more just like, yeah, don't eat a whole lot of saturated fat, but really just focus on whole foods. Just eat whole foods that should help you eat less calories, exercise, whatever. Anyway, thanks for watching. Subscribe, support the channel, patreon.com/unnaturalvegan, and I'll have a new video soon. And so for these people, it makes more sense to... Aw, you butthole. Did I just say butthole?